Tabletop gaming is changing the way players interact, and tabletop titles are dominating the crowdfunding scene. Let's roll for initiative. I'm Mandy Roman, and welcome to Game Talk Live, where we discuss the biggest video game news of the day, live with help from our chat audience. Joining me now are three expert guests to discuss these gaming topics and more. First up is Satine. Satine Phoenix is co-creator of Maze Arcana, Dungeon Master of Sirens of the Realms on twitch.tv/DND, and host of GM Tips on Geek and Sundry. She is also co-author of The Action Heroine's Journey and co-creator and artist on New Praetorians, as well as a jewelry designer on burningquill.com. You can read about her gaming escapades over the years on IO9, Wired, Maxim, and Time magazines. Satine, what haven't you done?
Space travel.
Oh, good answer. Welcome to the show. All right, also joining us today is Ross Thompson, a Southern California geek who is actively involved in board gaming, medieval reenactment, beer, and a love of social media. Ross has spent over 10 years in the tabletop gaming industry and is currently the marketing and events manager at IDW Games. He also puts together a tabletop convention, Kingdom Con, which will be having its 9th year next week. Welcome, Ross.
Welcome.
And also joining us today is Zach Eubank, the CEO of Hyper RPG and previous showrunner of Geek and Sundry's Live Network. Hyper RPG was founded by Zach in partnership with game industry veteran Jordan Wiseman to explore interactive live storytelling through role-playing games. Hyper RPG currently broadcasts 40 hours of tabletop RPGs every single week. Welcome, Zach.
Hey, what's up?
Howdy. All right, guys, let's hop right to it. Tabletop gaming is not a new phenomenon, but the industry has seen substantial growth over the last few years. Crowdfunding resources like Kickstarter have helped catapult popular games into the spotlight and overtake video games in some instances. In 2017, Kickstarter tabletop games pulled in about $137 million, while video games on the site earned about $17 million. So, how is crowdfunding changing the tabletop landscape? Ross, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Well, so with crowdfunding, it really gives the ability for game publishers and game designers to bring a game they have an idea to the market, and it lets them, kind of gauge what they want to do. I think one of the first big ones that really hit was Zombicide by Cool Money or Not. I want to say in 2012. And when that launched, I think that was one of the first big games that people saw and allowed them to do that. And we've seen really big growth now with games that wouldn't really maybe hit retail, kind of like Kingdom Death, which hit over $12 million for their Kickstarter they did for that. And even right now, like we're seeing campaigns for like Dinosaur Island and for the Street Fighter one that just got shown up there. And so it really lets kind of companies that wouldn't really get like into the market, whether with distribution or retail and conventions, but it lets them show off what they have, and then consumers can purchase with their wallet, and then distributors from there can see it and go, oh my gosh, we got to carry it for stores. And so it lets companies that, wouldn't really get that chance to kind of blow up, which is super awesome.
Sure. Yeah, Satine, have you seen crowdfunding kind of change the tabletop and just RPG landscape?
Yeah, it's amazing because it brings everyone together. And the whole thing about Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop gaming is it's inclusive cooperative gaming. And now you have people creating stuff out of their own imagination. Everyone seems to be drawn towards it and supportive of one another. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I'm getting out of it.
Mm-hmm. So, Zach, why do you think tabletop games are having more success than video games on crowdfunding websites?
I think it might have something to do with the community feeling of it in and of itself, whereas a game studio still has this feeling of being a little disconnected from its audience. And I think tabletop developers have done a really great job of embracing that at the table feeling. So it feels like you're supporting a friend or somebody that you might know who really, really cares about the creative process of that game that's in front of you. And you're more likely to feel like you're getting some reward out of supporting them than, say, a game studio that feels a little bit more like shadowy and corporate and might not need your support.
Interesting. So why do you think there are so many flops or unfinished video game projects, Ross?
Well, I think it has to do with the production cycle. Like for board games, it's a lot easier, I think, in the grand scheme of things to be like, okay, we'll get an artist, we'll get everything out, we'll get it printed, because you're just getting your cards. And like the hardest part you've seen for miniatures has been for board games, has been for miniature games and things like that, where it's difficult. Where with video games, I think maybe you can you bite a little bit harder than you want to, right? So you're dreaming a little bit bigger. Oh, we can add in this, so we can add in that. and you keep building and adding onto that. And with a lot of board games, the community's a lot tighter too. There's a lot of experts in the field that really help with publishers and designers that want to make their games. And so there's a lot of information that's openly shared. So like if we wanted to make a game right now, we could do that and find out where we want to get it published, what artists are available, and things like that. So it's a lot easier to find information to get things done, where for video games, I mean, we could look at Star Citizen, for example, right? Like, that's still one of the biggest funded things ever, but is it ever going to come out? Let's find out, right?
That's yet to be determined. We have an entire episode on Star Citizen. For those of you watching, if you haven't checked it out yet, highly recommend doing so. Alex in chat says, you don't need bleeding-edge hardware to play tabletop games, which is totally a true statement. And also, most of the gaming projects on Kickstarter are PC, so they're also limited by what kind of console you have or what gaming platform you have. So there seems to also be a new wave of tabletop game creators and designers hopping onto Patreon. Do you think this platform is allowing tabletop to thrive as well? I mean, why select this over, say, a traditional crowdfunding method? Satine?
Well, I think it's more direct. You get feedback from people so much more instantaneously. You say, this is what I'm doing. Do you like it? So it's market research, instant market research, and replies, which is something that larger companies don't do or can't do. Mm-hmm.
Zach, do you agree? I mean, do you see more people hopping onto Patreon to get their tabletop games going?
Yeah, I would just jump directly on her point and say I think that's exactly it. It's all about that community aspect. So any tool that allows you to get closer to the community that's supporting your game, I think you're going to get better results out of it. And Patreon's built some great tools for that. Mm-hmm.
Do you notice that with like the Hyper RPG chat? Are they helping kind of drive what decisions you guys are making and what games or campaigns you're playing?
Oh, 100%. We do votes. We talk to them directly. It's a very tight-knit community. I know we've had Ross come on the channel a couple of times showing off games that they're kickstarting. And it's using those tight-knit communities is a great way to get the funding for those games. That I definitely know that when we've had video game publishers come on, they're not as successful in the audience jumping over and showing their support and getting them funded.
Interesting.
Yeah, we actually had a...
Go ahead, Ross. Yeah, please.
Really quick for the Patreon thing. We had a game come out on Loot Crate for X-Files. It was called X-Files Circle of Truth. And the Button Shy company, they were the guys that made the game. It was a cool card game in a wallet. They actually do most of their games on Patreon. And they came by at Gen Con and kind of pitched us this cool wallet game they had going on. But he makes games every month, and it's just cool little cards and stuff like that. And so I think even with, we see everything big on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and stuff, like the Patreon community really is there, which is pretty exciting.
Right. So industry trade publication ICV2 estimates that the tabletop industry rose to $1.2 billion in 2015, up from $880 million the year before. So what do you think is the biggest single factor for this growth? Ross, why don't you start us off? And I want to hear this from everyone.
People want to play games, and they want to hang out, and they want that interaction, and that's really where it's at. We're at a point right now where it's not the money that we're spending, it's the time that we're spending together, right? And so if people want to play a game, they're going to go get it. And there's so many games coming out. I think it was like 3,000 games last year. We're estimating almost 5,000 games are going to come out in the industry this year, right? And so it's all about the experiences that we can spend together in those moments that we make. And so people want to play these new games. And the cool thing is there's so many good games coming out right now by so many awesome designers that people just want to be a part of that. And so the more games that are out there, people want to pick them up and play them, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Satine, what do you got?
Well, we live in a binge culture where we hang out and watch the entire season of something on Netflix, and we can't digest story enough. And the world is so overbearing and rough right now that it's our way of being creative, because the game master or the dungeon master isn't the only person making the game. They're facilitating creativity from everyone else. So we are in dire need of interaction. We're in dire need of a creative outlet. And we only have a couple hours a week to do that. So I think people just need to play in general more. And this is a very easy way to do it. Sometimes I'll be game mastering. I don't even use dice. If I'm hanging out with somebody, I'm like, we got 20 minutes, let's do this. And then they go home and then they start reading more and they get more involved. And then, it's the range and the possibilities of tabletop games is so much bigger than video games.
What do you think, Zach? What do you think is the biggest factor in tabletop's growth?
I think over the last 10 years, we've been really fortunate to see in the general media and landscape of entertainment industry, this social stigma against nerddom kind of disappearing. And as that's happening, more and more people are kind of openly sharing the things that they love and finding that, oh, that person sitting next to me also loves that thing too. And I think it's in a weird way, as we get more distant through some of our social media practices, we're also getting closer together through all the things that we love and we grew up loving, and now those things are more readily available for us.
So Satine, you're talking about a lot of weight that's on us a lot, and kind of maybe the pressures of just like social media and politics and all that just kind of stuff. So has the rise in social media and smartphones created like an atmosphere where people need to unplug, and that's kind of allowed tabletop and board games to thrive?
Absolutely. I think that especially people like me who are sober, right? We're all into escapism to get out of our normal lives, but I don't want to go to a bar. I want to sit and talk to people, but sometimes I don't want to go on and on about my emotional state or whatever. And I just want to do something silly and be fun. And I think this gaming is perfect for that.
Yeah. Ross, what about you? I mean, has a rise in social media created this atmosphere where people need to unplug, and then you guys have seen success because of it?
Oh, I totally agree. It's there's so much stuff going on where people are just like you're checking your phone all the time and doing all these things, which is great because like I get to hang out and see what my friends are doing all over the place. But hey, let's play games, just hang out is really something special. Like where you get to I see friends where I only see them during board game time. So like for us, that's a cool moment where we can just, hey, we're going to play this new game. We got it checked out. And so, because we're always so plugged in, which I know I'm like plugged in all the time on my phone. So it's nice.
I mean, we're all plugged in right now. I mean,
right now, right? Here we are. So,
yeah.
I would actually like to add something to that when you're.
Hey, Satine, go ahead. Yeah.
You know, the thing about social media is like I see you guys all the time on the internet. I'm watching, but you guys inspire me, right? So if I'm just watching everybody on the internet, it's not just the weight of like the news and all that. It's that everybody's doing stuff now, and it inspires me to do more things, and it ups my game, and we all see each other. And so we're all more and more creative because we get to see everybody being more creative in the way they do things. And like, I would never think to do a thing a certain way, but because I now have access to all of my friends across the globe, now I want to be better and do more.
That is a very glass half full way to look at social media, Satine. So kudos to that. All right. So should more video game developers be jumping aboard the tabletop train? I mean, is this a good way to get new or additional exposure for a title? I mean, you guys already brought up the new Street Fighter miniatures game. Zach, what do you think?
I don't have much experience on whether or not the game developers of video games should jump over, but I encourage it a lot to IPs of entertainment in general, because I do think there's an audience out there that wants to get closer to the content. I think tabletop games are a great way to do that. So I guess it would also work for video games as well, or if you have these great stories and worlds that you've built, exploring them through some sort of tabletop role-playing scenario is an amazing way to get really, really close to those stories that you grew up loving or that you love currently that people want to share with their friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Russ, what do you think? Should more game devs hop aboard the train?
Well, so we're in the middle right now for IDW doing a bunch of retro board games. So we have Atari Centipede. We just came out with Atari Missile Command. We just announced we're going to be doing a Midway's Joust board game.
Amazing.
Which are all super fun and very retro. They come with like a patch and the whole thing like that. And I think as we've seen, like you just went off like the Dark Souls game by Steam Forged. And there's a lot more of these publishers that I think are looking for more ways, as Zach was saying, for people to consume that media, right? And especially as we're looking more storytelling in general. There's like if I want to play more Dark Souls stuff, and I've already played through the Dark Souls video game a whole bunch, being able to do that through a board game or through a card game or through a role-playing game would be an excellent way to do that. And so I think we could look at Fallout, right, with Bethesda, and they were everything had a Bethesda. There was a Monopoly, there was a Clue, there's a board game that just came out for that, right? People just wanted to explore that fandom and that environment. And so being able to play it through a different medium like a board game or a card game is an excellent way to do that.
Yeah, and Fallout Operation, for the record, guys, is a goddamn blast. So I know that's not like the pinnacle of board games, but Fallout Operation is a lot of fun. Okay, so Farquaad in chat brings up a great point. I would think tabletop streaming on Twitch has probably helped its growth, and I feel like we have the perfect panel here to talk about that. So, I mean, Zach, as the CEO of Hyper RPG, how has just this whole streaming trend and kind of phenomenon changed the way people are interacting with tabletop?
Well, I would say I'd never played tabletop games before I started Geek and Sundry's live network. Like, that was me diving in head first. And the second we started doing testing for the first run of shows, everything was like, wow, I was unfortunate growing up out in the middle of nowhere to not experience this kind of group play, and starting to do it with friends and colleagues and bringing it all together like that. It immediately took me by storm, and I wanted to share that experience with people on the internet as quickly as possible to as many people as possible, because I do think it's an amazing experience to tell stories with friends, and that's something that I think any human being can relate to at any point in their life, you know, and getting to do that through the enabled kind of story-driven tactics of an RPG scenario is just an amazing experience. I think it's only going to keep growing from here.
Satine, did you think 5 years ago that you'd be hosting multiple role-playing shows on the internet?
Let me put it this way. I've been playing for about 30 years. And when I was in high school, we were like, yeah, maybe we should record these. And then we can like write novels like Dragonlance, because I love those books, you know? And here we are just pumping out stories. I can barely keep up. It takes so much to write them. But being able to share them with other people and getting their responses and getting other ideas for stories, like, I honestly can't believe the way reality has taken storytelling. And this is just really beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Ross has streaming and all these different Twitch channels now for role-playing games kind of changed the way you guys market your titles?
No, 100%. I think when we've seen stuff from Critical Role into everything Hyper RPG is doing and Maze Arcana is doing, just the way that people are consuming that kind of content is great, and everyone's trying to find the next big thing to do it. At GDC, we just saw that Oculus just announced they're doing a VR Catan. Right, and so
which looks amazing, by the way.
Yeah. And so Experiment 7 is doing that, and they've been working a lot with Asmodee Digital on that, which is super cool. And so we're seeing that be explored. There's been Werewolf, which is on Twitch too, and people are playing that. And so as viewers, you can see who's which character, but then people who are playing, they don't know who's who, and so all that stuff. I bet we're going to see a lot more with that, and it's exciting because for a publisher, we're always looking to go, hey, how can we get more involved in that? And it's a lot easier to have people see what games are being played too, because now you can show it off right away. Even for on the crowdfunding thing, Kickstarter just included a Kickstarter Live button. So now instead of having to go through Twitch or go through Facebook, which is all great, Kickstarter has a direct way to do that. It has right into the comment section, so people can now watch direct on Kickstarter for their live stuff too.
Joshua in chat says, I think both Satine and Zach have inspired me to run my own D&D game. So, awesome. Yay. So, speaking about Catan in VR, are board game developers moving toward digital? Maybe, they're moving toward because a physical copy could set you back, $100 for like a premier tabletop game. What do you think, Zach?
Oh, definitely. We've been seeing this a lot recently. I mean, even I know I'm plugging my business partner here, but the BattleTech game that's coming up, which is a very similar, basically the tabletop game built into a full-featured video game. So I think you're going to see that more and more. Just, again, it's just we want to consume these stories. We want to consume these characters as much as possible. So I think that cross back, forth is just going to keep happening. If people are creating really great properties, let's explore them on TV, web, everywhere that we can,
Sure. Satine, have you incorporated any digital elements to any of your campaigns?
I do. I actually have an iPad that I use Sirenscape on that for the soundtrack. I use D&D Beyond to create everything. And I have what I used to bring a big backpack full of books. Now I have everything in the palm of my hand.
Much more convenient. So in the case of Street Fighter, the miniatures game, the CEO and founder of Jasco, Jason Horonsky, said, quote, currently there is no way to produce a retail version. The components are all too high quality. The MSRP would be like $250 a game. This may be a possibility way down the road or with an altered components, but we are not looking at that at this time. So does this hurt its chances at creating a community for the game when only a small number of people will be able to get their hands on it? Ross, what do you think?
So we've seen a lot of companies start announcing that they're doing Kickstarter-only games in the last couple of years. Monolith has been a big example of that, where they had a Conan the Barbarian game that was only for where it was on retail or Kickstarter, then it kind of went to retail. And they just finished up their Batman Kickstarter, where they had a big Batman miniatures game that was Kickstarter only, and I think the base pledge was like $230 or something, and it did really, really well. And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I want to be able to get that." And they're like, well, it's only available this limited time. And so then when Jasco announced Street Fighter, everyone's looking at those miniatures, like, and I know it's checking it out, like, oh man, those are awesome, I want to get it, but it's only going to be during their Kickstarter. And so I think we're at a point right now where people are trying, like the consumer's trying to figure out what kind of amount do they want to spend in the store to have that experience. And I think we don't really know what the best is, because like Kingdom Death came out, and that's retail only, and the base game is like $350 if you want this big thing here, or you can buy it on their store for $130 direct. But at the same time, like, people are playing it and buying it and consuming it, and so I think if they were able to make a way to have it go into stores, it would work. But with stores, you're dealing with so much other through distribution and like that 3-tier system where you've got manufacturer, publisher, distributor, store. There's so many extra stuff, and then you got to deal with online discounters that it's like, for a publisher, sometimes it's just easier to go direct to consumers, but at the same time, you still want to support your local store and everybody that makes that happen for all your other games. And so it's kind of difficult to see what the best route is. But with Jasco's game, like, they're having a lot of success on Kickstarter right now, and those miniatures just look awesome.
Incredible.
So,
yeah, I think people are just buying it just for those miniatures. Those are really, really nice.
Right.
So, Zach, do you think that you can attribute kind of the maybe inaccessibility of some titles to the success of Hyper RPG, because people are tuning in, watching games that maybe they couldn't afford on their own?
Yeah, I think there's some aspect as well. I think most people probably watch a lot of these games on Twitch because they want to be a part of that experience. They may not have a group of friends that they can play with at the moment. And I know it leads to a lot of people finding friends they can play with. So if you've been thinking about joining a D&D game, watching a D&D stream is a great way to then find other like-minded people to play games with. I don't know necessarily how many people I've seen. That might just be because we're not showing many games on our channel that are completely inaccessible to others. Actually, that's not true. We have made a couple shows that are literally we made just for the program, and you can't buy it anywhere. But we use that for the developers as a market test to see what the interest is in that game and whether or not they should take it to publish.
So, Ross, you brought up Kickstarter Exclusive. Is Kickstarter Exclusive or Amazon or just the amount of games coming out killing your friendly local gaming stores?
That's the question, isn't it? Right? So I think recently we've seen a lot of success on publishers' end for stores that are doing reprints on Kickstarter. Dinosaur Island, Kingdom Death, Roleplayer, both had a Kickstarter launch. Then for some of those games that went to retail and then they sold out, and then to do another run, they decided to run a second Kickstarter for it. And so initially people were like, oh no, if it's going to go to Kickstarter, I don't want to carry it in my store. But then we're seeing that only so many people purchased it. But then after a while, it gains a lot of reputation on Board Game Geek, some really good reviews. People had it at conventions. And so stores are like, I really want to carry it. And I think for Dinosaur Island, for example, they had a big Kickstarter initially when it came out, and then it went to retail stores and sold out right away. And then they have one running right now that's doing very well for them. And so I think it's that, what do retailers want to carry? And so is it killing the local game store? I don't think so. Because at the same time, stores are still selling really well of your Catan and Small World and Ticket to Ride and D&D and Warhammer and Magic the Gathering. So all these things that kind of keep stores forward. And so if they're only going to carry 1 or 2 copies of these games that are on Kickstarter, they aren't, missing out on a whole bunch, because there's, as I was saying, like 3,000 to 5,000 games coming out now. And so as a retailer, they're having almost more of a debate of what games do I carry. It used to be so much easier a couple of years ago where you're like, oh, okay, Zombicide's the new big thing. I got to get Mansions of Madness, Imperial Assault. But now even when you look at miniature games and board games that are all hitting Kickstarter, there's so many games coming out. And I think more it's a debate of how do we know what to consume via our marketing bandwidth and not really the store. But if the store is active, they should be okay, which is why there's groups like Gamma and a lot of industry groups that are here to help out. So I don't think the Kickstarter is killing the local stores, but it does put more work on the store to figure out what kind of games they need to carry for their people that are shopping.
Sure. So if we're talking 3,000 to 5,000 tabletop games, or whatever you want to call them, being released every year, are we kind of living in a board game bubble right now? Is there a fear of collapse, or do you think this growth will continue? Satine?
I don't know. I think things are evolving. Even Twitch is just in this infancy stage, and it's all a mystery.
I mean, Zach, what do you think? Do you think the bubble could burst, or do you continue to see growth here?
I think if people start focusing on reaching a lot of unserved groups like now, people of color and women in that tabletop space, we're going to start seeing it grow even more and more, because I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. And as those groups are being reached, I think this is just going to keep growing. I don't think we're even close to the top yet.
Yeah. Well, you got a shout out in chat, Zach. Anna says, I think channels like Hyper RPG help local game stores. I see them play a game I've never heard of, and then I go out and buy it. So, yes.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm going to ask you all this question. What's next in tabletop? Are any upcoming trends you see? Satine?
Oh, man. I don't know. I think that people are starting to understand the inclusivity and understand cooperation in storytelling. And by watching people on Twitch perform and play games, they're now at the local gaming stores being more okay with saying, this is the game that we want to play, and we don't accept the person who's going to try to steal from another player, and this makes me uncomfortable, so here's my X card. So it's making the voice, each individual person's voice, and the community kind of come together in a very positive manner.
Mm-hmm. Zach, what about you? Any upcoming trends you're seeing?
Well, I know miniatures are pretty hot right now. That's the last couple cons that I've been to. The games that feature really detailed and awesome miniatures have been huge successes. I'm hoping to see more digital trends, like with Monocle Society's Weave and some other games that are exploring this idea of using your phone as a companion piece to explore other aspects of the game that you wouldn't be able to get by just having something on the table.
Sure. All right, Ross, what you got?
I would say role-playing games, funny enough. I think with the two people I have on the panel here, that we're all buddied up, that Twitch has been huge for gaming, and we're being able to see all this stuff. Wizards of the Coast reported they've had the best year in sales in a long time for 2017, and I think it's only going to get bigger. And we've seen other RPGs like Pugmire and Seven Seas and a lot of these other big role-playing games do really well. And then with Weave, excellent drop from Zach there with Monocle Society. People want to have more storytelling, and it's been a good theme today. And I think that's really a trend that we're going to get more on. Is that just telling games and role-playing games. I think that's really where we're going to see a lot more stuff soon.
Mm-hmm. And Zach, I'm glad you brought up miniatures. If you guys ever attend PAX West, the miniature painting room is one of my favorite things to go and do. So kudos to the miniatures company that put that together. So awesome. All right, guys, let's take a quick break. But before we do, I want to ask our viewers to send us a message letting us know what topics you'd like to see us discuss on the show. We'll be right back.
Make some noise. Getting some Satine, but does it with the explosion of the car.
Hi, my name's Todd. We're going to be playing some H1Z1, and a lot of you out there are going to be able to win some prizes by guessing when our guests die. Sasha, are you ready to go play some H1Z1?
Let's do this.
I think we've seen this story before.
We got a lot of guests tonight from all over the world. They're competing for a trophy, our Champion of the Night prize. Which one of you is going to be the best player tonight?
Anybody that comes in my way is done.
Get a helmet, get a backpack, get a rifle.
Or just hide and hope I get lucky.
He's feeling the earth. That's a very Native American approach to battle.
I give the people what they want to see.
Oh my God! Oh wow, he took a big hit. He got it, guys!
Can you throw me in like the Norwegian server or like someplace where they're just not gonna find me?
No.
Did I die first?
No one's died that early in the game ever.
Welcome back, everybody. Video games for a while were social experiences, from the arcade to internet cafes to couch co-op or multiplayer, but since the early 2000s, these trends have slowly died off, giving rise to online multiplayer with people that could be anywhere. Is the in-person social aspect of tabletop games what appeals to people these days? Satine?
Well, it is for Maze Arcana. I mean, there's all these amazing streams that have head in the boxes, and as much as I love guesting on those, I just need my friends at the table with me. I need to be able to touch them, and I need to feel the fear that I instill in them. That's what attracts me to these games. And I know there's a lot of stuff like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds where you can actually play games online with people, but I'm old-fashioned. I need that tactile experience.
So I can't not have this episode and not talk about Stranger Things. I mean, do you think Stranger Things has been pivotal in bringing Dungeons and Dragons into the mainstream? Zach, you are nodding your head. What you got?
Oh, yeah. I mean, any instance, including, shows like Community that bring these games to the forefront and just kind of show people. I think a lot of people have always loved these, but they maybe have been afraid to say, oh, I used to do that and I loved it. Whatever happened to that? So it's just bringing it to the forefront of our social experiences and media is just allowing us to say, oh, it's cool again. Yeah, let's get into it. Let's dive back in. This is a cool thing now, and I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm. Quick comment from our chat. This is regarding digital. Jonathan says, I mentioned it in the Twitch chat, but the trend towards digital tabletop games is neat. I think of games like U-Realms that is entirely designed for tabletop simulator, or Jackbox being designed for phones combined with television. Cool stuff. And also, I do want to mention, if you guys are watching on Twitch, head on over to our Facebook page so we can interact with you, the chat, and pull your comments up so everyone can read them. So back to Stranger Things here for a second. Ross, do you think that this has been kind of pivotal in making RPGs cool, or just like the norm now?
Well, I think D&D and RPGs were already on the upswing to be cool.
Nice.
Even before that, Geek is cool. Thank you, MCU and Marvel, and doing all that stuff like that. And but Stranger Things really kind of showed much more of a, I think when they were playing and they finally got to go fight the Demogorgon and had the spell, that those moments are really what people like watching about role-playing games. And I remember playing D&D and all those things. And so I think if more people are to see that, that's where it's at, because we're only really getting a little bit of people that are really playing games, and there's such a wider audience that can really dive into this. I think the more people that are playing games, the merrier, and so the more they can consume and kind of see all the cool shows we have on Twitch, or they go to cons and see that. That's the way to go. And so Stranger Things was a really good way to for people to consume what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Satine, would you say this is inspiring a new generation of gamers? Because I think there's probably a lot of young folks watching, young folks. God, sorry, that makes me sound so old. Is there this younger generation now watching Stranger Things, being, oh, what's Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe now they're picking up games like this?
Well, there used to be that stigma of old dudes in their basement playing these games in the dark, and now watching Stranger Things, you see these kids having fun, and you see community, and there's adults having fun, and so things like that. Plus, you got Vin Diesel and Joe Manganiello and Deborah Ann Wall coming out and saying, "Yeah, we play too," and all these other people. The more people that pronounce it, and the more people that say, "Yeah, I am this stereotype, and I'm not this stereotype, and I still love this," the more acceptable it'll be for other people to be like, well, I always wanted to play it, so yeah, I guess I'll try it. Mm-hmm. And that's old and young. There's a group out of Chicago. It's a teacher and his kids, and they started live streaming, and just, you've got all of us adults live streaming D&D games, and now you've got these kids live streaming, and it's just more inspiration for more people to keep playing.
Lee in chat says, the in-person aspect is still the most important thing to me with tabletop games. So RPGs are a pretty niche pocket of pop culture. And Zach, did you feel like launching a channel purely focused on this was risky?
Oh, it was really stupid. It was really dumb. It was a huge, dumb move, but I'm really glad we stuck with it for as long as we have, because we've been able to build. I mean, it's not always a bad thing to go for a niche. It's just you're going to struggle through really murky water for a very long time until you find your audience. I think a lot of us are still having a hard time finding our audience. You know, for all the advancements that Twitch has made, for the most part, there's still not a really good category on Twitch. And a lot of people say, when I'm at Gen Con and we had a booth at Gen Con, I'd say 80% of the people we interacted with had never been to Twitch, but it's still our best option for getting the word out there. So there's a huge audience out there that still hasn't found their people on the internet, and I can't wait for them to come over.
Yeah. Eric in chat says, my Starfinder group meets in person, but also has 2 players Skype in via Roll20. Hybrid works great for us. Yeah. So what's the difference between a good and a bad DM? Satine?
Well, if you don't listen to your players and you don't get to know their characters and you're not sensitive to their needs or when they are shy and pull that out, I think just being hyper strict about things, that's not a very good dungeon master.
Ross is DMing for everyone?
I think everyone should give it a try. Yeah. Right? I think it's one of those things where, you know, people always say, oh, I just want to be a player, I want to do it up, but there's so much extra that goes into being a dungeon master that I think everyone should at least give it a shot once.
And kind of see what it's like behind the wall, the banner. Satine, what's been the most, I guess, challenging aspect of running multiple campaigns at one time? Because aren't you running like 3 campaigns right now?
Yeah, and I run one for our Patreon people. Actually, that's what I'm doing after this. We have the big finale. Well, I have brain damage from a car accident, so getting the stories lined up, and it took me the last year to figure out my pattern and the best way to do things to keep all the stories separate and all the characters. It's just a lot of coordination. Oh, it's a lot of coordination.
Zach, have you experienced this on the hyper RPG side? How do you go about recruiting the DMs for your campaigns?
It's a lot of just talking to people. We have a lot of our friends over. We work a lot with UCB performers and giant nerds and communicating with them on what it is they're looking to do. I'm personally GMing 3 or 4 right now, and we have, I think we're up to 8 currently at the moment that we work with. And I don't think there's any such thing as GMing wrong, as long as you're communicating with your players and getting what they want out of that experience and having a good time together. If everyone's having fun, it's going to be fun to watch as well. So when we're looking for people to GM, I mean, good storytelling abilities helps a lot. Being able to speak clearly and link point A to point B to point C helps a lot in keeping all those things moving in your head. But outside of that, as long as you can have a lot of fun and smile with your players, that's a great quality to have.
So, Satine, have you ever run into issues with fans calling out certain actions or stats or character reactions, and how do you go about handling this? You start cackling, so it must have happened.
It just happened.
Oh my God.
Well, I always start off saying, you know, like, I don't remember all the things, and if we can't figure out the rule within 1 minute, we're going to move on, especially for streaming. You have to just keep the story moving. So, you know, there was a whole thing about healing, and for me, if you go down and you're unconscious, somebody does healing word, I have this whole issue of, like, them saying it, and you're unconscious, they can't actually hear you, so there was a whole thing in the chat, and I just say, well, Dungeon Master rule.
That's
period.
Ross, what about you? I mean, as a gamer yourself too, have you run into issues like this where people are calling out stuff?
Oh, so I used to do a lot of demos at conventions just for years and years, and my roommate now, he can't hang out when I'm demoing games because he'll always correct me when I'm like kind of flipping a rule wrong or kind of going really quick, and he's like, "Oh, that isn't how that works," and I'm like, "It's about the experience. Go away, go away."
Oh my God, over the shoulder GMing.
all the convincing. It's the worst.
Gosh, Zach, how do you handle this on Hyper in chat if people are calling stuff out?
We troll them back usually, which might not be the best way to go about it. But we also develop a lot of our own games, so they can't argue with us. We'll develop it from the ground up, and then if they try to rules lawyer us, we'll say that, well, you didn't make it, we did. So we have final say on that. But for some of the games that do have a much deeper rule base, we always just try to remind people the most important thing is having fun. You know, no game was ever designed to follow every single rule. I mean, even speedrunning is technically breaking a game. So it's about how you want to experience that game and how you want to play it with the players at the table.
Yeah. So Satine, how do you feel about bending the rules in a campaign, you know, just to keep it going, keep the momentum going?
Yeah, so live stream gaming is different than like normal game store gaming, and Adventures League gaming is different than all of that. So as long as your rules are consistent, I think that's the most important thing. So if you're going to bend the rules, make them consistent for all the players.
Andrew in chat says, great answer from Satine. Listen to your players. I'd add that players need to listen to each other too and adjust accordingly. So is there a good place to start when getting into, say, Dungeons & Dragons? I mean, what would you say to someone who can't find a campaign to join? How can they still participate in the fandom? Ross, what do you think?
Well, I think we have two excellent communities right here, right? So I think if you go find Hyper RPG or Maze Arcana, or you can get Geek and Sundry and all of that, there's so many cool communities that are out there to go jump into. And then even that is exploring on Twitch, and there's podcasts, and there's blogs, and there's so many communities out there. Like if you just go onto Facebook and type in Dungeons and Dragons, you'll have a bunch of different communities that'll pop up in groups. And if you were to go in there and be like, hey, I'm looking for a podcast to follow or somewhere to follow on Twitch, it'd be super cool too. But at the same time, like Wizards and Paizo and a lot of the big role-playing game companies, they've got organized play that you can go look up, and they with the local game store, they've got ways to do that. Or if you go to a convention, you can find lots of games to play there too. I know at MyCon next weekend, we've got a lot of intro games that are all about promoting the local game groups, stores, and communities and stuff, which is just, okay, you got to just go out there and find it. If your friends don't want to play it, there's someone out there that definitely does.
Zach, what advice would you give to someone that wants to now hop on the RPG train?
Find what's comfortable for you. Not everybody is comfortable going to a game house and playing with a group of strangers. I know I wasn't. I'm definitely one of the socially awkward side of nerddom. Of I don't personally like leaving my house. So Twitch has been really great for me in finding friends and bringing them to me. And I would recommend just find what works for you. If you don't think that you have have it in you to go to an actual store and do Adventure League or something like that, join one of these channels, hop into the chat room. You'll probably find the link to their Discord. There's a lot of people setting up custom games on Discord, and those communities, all the communities that were mentioned, are going to be really great at helping train you and being patient with you. You're not going to find jerks in those communities, so you should be well taken care of.
Yeah. Joshua in chat says, tabletop RPG games are awesome for people like me with autism. So, Satine, lastly, I would love to hear from you. Is there a good place to start when you want to get into, say, tabletop or RPGs?
As a matter of fact, there is. So whatever platform you want to play, Dungeons & Dragons, Paizo, all of these, they all have websites, they have forums that you can go to and talk to people. So that's a direct connect for those specific things. Rudy and I both run meetup groups. So, and I actually started running one here in Los Angeles because of the one I found in Australia when I wanted to make some friends that played D&D, LA Tabletop Gamers. And ours at least connects all of the different gaming stores, and people can post things on there. I have some people who play. I have a friend who's in Perth, a friend who's in Poland, and a friend who's in Germany, and we all play Roll20, Fantasy Grounds. Whatever your flavor of wanting to play or ability to play, there is a place for you. It's less about not being able to find a group and more about finding the right group.
All right, guys, we are coming to the end of our show. I want to thank all of our viewers and our guests for being here. Tell us your final thoughts and where people can find you on social media, and we'll start with Satine.
I'm Satine, and the moral of the story is play, because that's important. It also keeps you young. You can find me at Satine Phoenix on all the social medias. On Tuesday, I Dungeon Master on D&D's Twitch stream, Sirens of the Realms, an all-girl bard band. We sing, we play, we dance. There's lots of color. On Wednesdays, we have Inkwell Society, which is Neon Noir and Eberron, Dungeons & Dragons as well. That's on twitch.tv/Maze Arcana. And if you want to learn a little bit more about game mastering or dungeon mastering, go to Geek and Sundry for GM tips.
All right, thanks, Satine. All right, Ross, your final thoughts and where people can find you online.
Hey, I'm Ross. And I'm at Adam's Kirk on most social media channels. I do a lot of IDW game stuff there, so I share my adventures around online. My gaming convention, Kingdom Con, is next weekend in San Diego. So if you want to come down and play some games, we'll be doing that. And we've got a Kickstarter coming up for IDW on May 9th for Nickelodeon Splat Attack.
Amazing. Thanks, Ross.
Yeah.
All right, Zach, your final thoughts and where people can find you online.
My final thought would have to be stealing from UCB and just say yes and all your experiences in role-playing, whether you're the GM or the players. Don't know anybody. Try to find a way to support their idea with your own and build off of it. And outside of that, I'm here at Hyper RPG every single day, and I don't want to go through a whole list of all the stuff we're doing because it would be ridiculously long and it's not healthy. But I will plug, I GM a show on Monday nights called 10 Candles. That is a horror anthology show, and it's super serious and super dark and super weird. You could definitely check that out. And we have a show... lots of them. Gosh, like I said, I don't want to sit here and plug everything, but we have a show tonight called Roguelike, which is a completely audience-generated RPG where you can go to roguelike.straylogic.com, insert all of your options, and the show is completely generated by things that people in the audience are submitting, so you get to feel like you're a part of the show.
That's incredible. And of course, you can follow Zach and all their adventures at Hyper RPG. All right, thanks to everyone who watched, commented, and shared the show. I'm Andy Roman. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and watch Game Talk Live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time. Have a great weekend, everybody.